the undercurrent is going in the right direction, I feel. It's like there's an evolutionary force that's working us all, you and me. And if you open yourself to that, if you ask for guidance, if you recognize that you're here and you are unique, you are a unique human being with unique talents and treasures, and that you have a role to play, that it's maybe not a big role or a small role, it's just your role. And if you can find it by telling the truth about what turns you on, what makes your heart sing, what breaks your heart, those are two questions. But there's also, what do you stand for? What is like, ooh, what it makes you teary. And then play your heart out. Whatever it is, something miraculous will happen.
Welcome to the Regeneration Will Be Funded. My name is Matthew Monahan, and in this series, we're exploring the intersections of regenerative finance, technology, and our living planet. Created with Ma Earth, you can find all of our conversations and more at maearth.com. Thanks for joining us. Today's guest is Lynne Twist of Pachamama Alliance. What a privilege to interview Lynne. She has a wealth of experiences and knowledge, and she's still out there doing the work alongside her husband, Bill. Such an inspiration. In this discussion, we talk about living a committed life, her work in the Amazon rainforest, exploring the soul of money, and how these different themes come together. Lynne is a masterful storyteller. This interview was a lot of fun. We did it at Bioneers in April 2023. Please join me in watching the one and only Lynne Twist. We're here today with Lynne Twist. Lynne is the co-founder of Pachamama Alliance, the founder of Soul of Money Institute, author of Soul of Money, and her newer book, Living a Committed Life. She is a pro-activist, global visionary, a teacher to many, and yes, really needs no introduction, I hope, for many listening and watching this. Thank you so much, Lynne, for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to have a conversation with you.
So maybe we can start with your recent book, Living a Committed Life, and if you can share with us a bit about what is the message of that book and what inspired you to write it and express yourself in this way?
Well, I'm actually not so much of an author, or at least I wrote 2 books, so I guess I am, but I don't have a real writing gift, I don't think. I can speak. I love to talk like we're having this conversation here. And I've, given that I've been engaged in global issues my whole life, 50 years, I have so many stories. And I was in a corporate conference with a group of CEOs, which is not really my normal venue because I worked primarily in what I call the social profit sector. I don't call it nonprofit or not-for-profit or non-governmental. I don't like calling it the not sector. So I call it the social profit sector, where we're generating a huge social profit and where many of the social profits work, P-R-O-P-H-E-T. So this venue was I can't remember, it was in San Diego or Santa Barbara, but it was CEOs of big companies. And I was a little bit of an odd choice to be there. I think they needed a woman speaker, sometimes they do. And I was given, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes, and I got into it. One of those times where, something starts coming through and you just go with it. And it worked. It was very, very well received, let's say, and very unusual message given the audience. It was a kind of a soul of money message in a highly profit-making, how can we improve our bottom line crowd? And they gave me extra time. Anyway, it was just really, really well received. And after I was done, there was a lunch break, and the person who convened everybody, one of the people who convened them, was Jack Canfield, who's a great friend of mine, the Chicken Soup for the Soul guy, who's sold 1 billion books, by the way, 1 billion.
1 billion.
With a B.
Wow.
And he said, these stories are so awesome. You need to get them. We need a book. You got to do another book. You can't just do one book. You've got to do another book. I said, well, I'm not like you. I can't crank out books. I'm too busy, doing my work with the indigenous people and transforming the world and trying to get us to have a sustainable future for all life. I can't stop and write a book. He said, well, I'll help you. You come to my living room in Santa Barbara. I'll get a group of my friends, really good listeners, and I'll interview you, and just like this, and you just tell me stories. And so he did that. We had a wonderful 3 days. It was. He had a caterer, and he had 30 people in his living room. Wonderful, wonderful people. And I couldn't believe they stayed there all 3 days, but they did. And I told like 167 stories or something like that, and it was all recorded and videoed, and then he had it all transcribed, and that was how to get me to write a book. And then it sat for a while, and I felt so guilty that I was raised a Catholic, so I have a real talent with guilt. That's kind of one of the top skills you get when you're raised Catholic.
My father was Catholic.
Yeah. So it just weighed on me that I wasn't doing anything with it. I was too busy, making the world work or whatever I do. And then my friend Mary Chase, who I just bow to, she's a writer. She's an actual writer. She's a collaborative writer. She said, I'll help you make this into a book. You just make 3 hours a week available to me when you're in town. And, however long it takes us, we'll make this into a book together. And she did that with me. And that was 3 or 4 years ago, I think now, before COVID. And the COVID pause really helped me get that whole set of stories into a book. The stories were, not only about me, but about the remarkable human beings that I've met in these decades of walking in this world. People that move me so deeply. And so it finally got itself written with Mary's help and mine. And then I realized now it came out the end of November, beginning of December, right? When I feel like we were being really liberated from the COVID thing. Not that we don't have more COVID cases, not that it's not a concern for people, but the grip of it was released. And so I feel like the book, Living a Committed Life, was destined to come out now. When people are looking to see, really, what are they committed to now? What is going on now that there's been enough of a pause, enough of a pull back, enough of a going home to our home places where we had to stay, but home here. And maybe not everybody, but a lot of people who have some authority and some agency are really looking at what now? What does the world need from me now, from you now, from us now? How can we turn the tide? How can we resource ourselves, recommit, renew, regenerate, redirect, rethink our lives, reimagine? And so the book I realize that's what it's about. It's about living a committed life. And when I say committed life, I sort of was lucky enough or blessed enough or fell into living what I call a committed life, because as a young woman, I became deeply, deeply engaged in ending world hunger. And I had 3 little kids, and Bill was a business guy, my husband.
Bill's your husband, yeah.
And the kids were little, and I had no business getting involved in big, giant issues. The one I got involved in was ending world hunger. So it was totally inconvenient, but the opportunity to make that kind of a difference with my life swept me off my feet, and I got deeply engaged in the work of ending hunger. And so this committed life that I've been living started to show up for me as a as something that really gave me a life I never could have created. It's almost as if you make a commitment larger than your own life starring you, which is mostly what people are concerned with, but a commitment to something bigger than you could possibly accomplish by yourself. You don't know how in the world you would do it. That it moves you to your core, and you just commit. It comes back, that commitment comes back and shapes you into the person you need to be to fulfill it. I mean, it's just amazing. And so that's in many ways what the book's about, not only about my path, but about people like you, people that we both know, people that I admire, ordinary people who've made an extraordinary commitment, and it shaped them into an extraordinary Whereas we often think you have to be simply extraordinary already and, totally together to make a big commitment. I think it's actually the other way around. We're all capable of doing simply miraculous things if we have the courage to set our sights on something that we can never take credit for, but we can give our life to. And so that's kind of a summary of a very kind of interesting way of looking at life. And that's what the book's about. And it's a lot of stories. So I feel grateful that to Jack Canfield, of course, for getting me to do it, for Mary Chase for getting it written, but also for the COVID pause, which was so painful for so many people, and I don't want to step over how horrific that was for many, many people living in situations where they were hurt worst and first, and people who lost relatives, and all of the people got really, really sick. At the same time, the indigenous people of the Amazon, where you've recently been and where I work, have said that COVID is a response to a primordial longing and deep yearning of the human family to have something sacred and powerful enough that would disrupt the way we're living, that we were trying to do on our own, but we couldn't do it because our systems and structures have become so powerful that we can't extract ourselves from them. And that COVID came from the earth. Everything comes from her, even the virus. And that they say it's an announcement, not a punishment, but an ally, helping us disrupt, stop, rethink, relook. And it really was that for me, and I think for many, many people, maybe for you. So to have the book come out now, when people are back in the action, how are they going to be back in the action? What action are they going to get into? Because we're clear, we've got to take action. It's not we can think about this and deliberate and wonder how and who and whether the government's going to do anything about it. Of course they can't. They have to get reelected, so they just can't. I mean, they can't play the role that we all wish they would play. They're just not going to do that. So it's people like you and me. And there's billions of us, and hundreds of millions of us are on the playing field. As Paul Hawken says, civil society is the largest participation event in human history. There's nothing that comes close, not even World War I and World War II. Millions and millions of organizations, millions of podcasts like this one, hundreds of millions of people on the field, and millions more, starting to realize I got to do something. So I hope the book is of service to those people, whoever they are, who take the moment to read it and read stories of ordinary people who've made extraordinary commitments and whose life has become free and fulfilled by that. So it's also a book about, at least in my view, how making a commitment larger than your own life, a purpose larger than your own life, creates a life of freedom and fulfillment that you couldn't have imagined or designed. So there is something in it for us, although if you start there, it's kind of cheating. But the book has been pretty well received, and I think it's a contribution.
Yeah, it's absolutely been very well received, and it really resonates with me. And this idea that it's not that you have to be extraordinary first. It's that you make that commitment, and then life shapes you to be up for that task.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think there are a lot of people that are thirsty and hungry for um, something to be committed to beyond maybe the previous stories offered to us, whether it's the fancy car or the job or the college degree or the bank account.
Mhm.
And so you're really putting a framework into place, and you're giving people a bit more structure to a way to think about this. I'm curious from your perspective, for someone who maybe has that deep yearning, but doesn't necessarily yet have the texture and shape of, I want to end world hunger. I want to work with the indigenous people in the Amazon. Like, what would you offer them, and any guidance or tips for them in terms of finding that path?
Well, everybody always asks me that, and I don't have a formula. I'm sorry, it's not.
It's the next
the
book,
7
Lynn.
steps to financial freedom, or like Susie or Orman or some of those wonderful authors. I don't have that, but I can say that, and I can say that looking at what breaks your heart
Mm,
and what makes your heart sing
mm,
is a clue if those two things can come together. But even more than that, that to realize we're living at an epic, epic time in history.
right.
Like, don't miss it. It's so exciting. Everything's at stake.
Right.
I mean, really, it's just awesome. This morning, you and I heard Joanna Macy speak, and when I interviewed her for my book, she said the coolest thing. She's 94 now. When I interviewed her, she was 93 or 92. I mean, she was up there. The great Buddhist and great, author and beloved teacher for many of us. She said, I'm so excited that I'm still here to see the great transition. It's underway. She's crying, I'm crying. And then she said, she's Buddhist. She said, souls are waiting in line, demanding to incarnate so they can be part of this. And I thought,
Wow.
yes. I say that in answer to your question because I want people to see not only are they needed and wanted on the playing field, but this is the time to be alive.
Yeah.
Thank God you and I are alive now. I mean, it's a multi-generational, intersectional, everything moment when we've got to come together, yes.
Right.
But I say we are coming together.
Right.
We're meant to come together.
Right.
All the separation that has been at the source of so much of our problems, our original separation from the earth herself, which was the beginning of the hierarchies that got built inside of the human journey, having human supremacy be the first separation.
Yeah.
It's time to, free ourselves from all of that. And that's huge. It's underway. It's clear to me. Now, things look terrible, and there's all these horrible news stories and school shootings, and oh my God, it's just like almost impossible to bear the kind of surface level of what's going on. But I would say in the undercurrent, like the metaphor that was spoken earlier today and yesterday in the Pioneers Conference, the undercurrent is going in the right direction. I feel it's like there's an evolutionary force that's working us all, you and me. And if you open yourself to that, if you ask for guidance, if you recognize that you're here and you are unique, you are a unique human being with unique talents and treasures, and that you have a role to play, that it's maybe not a big role or a small role, it's just your role. And if you can find it by telling the truth about what turns you on, what makes your heart sing, what breaks your heart, those are 2 questions. But there's also, what do you stand for? What is like, ooh, what it makes you teary. And then play your heart out. Whatever it is, something miraculous will happen for the world and for you. But it needs to be, I think, in service of. And if you can orient yourself, for those people who have that question, around that your life has been given to you. It's been given so that you can give it. That's my teacher, Brother David, I like these 90-year-old teachers. He's 96, 97 in July. Brother David Stendel-Rost, he's the living icon of gratefulness and gratitude, and a Benedictine monk and a really awesome human being. And he's so clear that life is given to us and that it's in service of. What's it given to us for? What's your life for? Not what's your life against, what's your life for? In service of what? And when you think about it that way, what your particular dharma will start to show up for you, I think. I can't promise that, but I suggest that everybody's here for a reason. It's not a mistake that you're on this planet at this time. You have something very special and unique to give, to provide, to engage in, not all by yourself, but with the extraordinary, plethora of human energy and, the community of life. Even the plants are on the team. I work in the Amazon. The plants, they're on the team. The forests are on the team. We're in such good company with the community of life. And if we pay attention, we're guided to be who we need to be. So that's the best I can do. There's no formula. But if there's an aperture, an opening, a hunger, an appetite to be of service, it'll show up for you. I have that trust in the universe.
Yeah. I especially when things feel so heavy, I think it's natural to take on more of a victim, this is all happening to us kind of mindset. And I love this way of framing things, like it's happening for us. And what a gift, what a gift to be alive and to participate in this moment. And you really are embodying that. And I'd love to hear more about this work that you've been doing in the Amazon. And I got to witness the ripples. That was my first time in the Amazon. And yes, the organizations that you've birthed and the people that you've touched, it was very visible in my travels. But maybe for listeners and viewers, if you could share more about that journey for you.
Well, for many, many years, I was engaged in the work of the Hunger Project, ending world hunger, and my life was really about sub-Saharan Africa, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, that part of the world, and then all of the Ethiopia, Ghana, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, all those wonderful countries, and then raising money all over the world. So I had no consciousness about the Amazon or indigenous people, really, for decades, really. I worked for 20, 25 years for the Hunger Project. And people in Central and South America aren't hungry. There's poverty, but not hunger. There's food. So that wasn't part of our purview, let's say.
Right.
But through a series of very mystical events, which you may have heard this story, I don't know, and I'd be happy to tell it, I ended up receiving a series of visions and dreams that didn't make any sense to me of indigenous people with face paint and feathers on their head. And it was totally outside of my understanding of life. And it was kind of over there. That was...
Right.
And I can tell you that story if you like. But,
can you please? Yeah.
Oh,
please,
okay. Yeah. It's an amazing story. Well, I was all in for ending world hunger. I mean, that was my life work. And my kids were involved. Bill was chairman of the U.S. board. He was still in business, but I was just dedicated. It wasn't a job. It was my life, ending world hunger. And I had the great privilege of working with Mother Teresa in India and working with Desmond Tutu and be at Nelson Mandela's inauguration. And, I had these, working in Ethiopia after the 1984, 1985 famine, being in Mozambique after that war. I mean, that was my world. And my dear friend, one of my donors, I'm a fundraiser, I set all the fundraising for the Hunger Project, invited me to help with a project he had in Central America in the country of Guatemala, and asked me if I would do a favor and take a 2-week leave and help him with his fundraising his development director in Guatemala, and go to a board meeting there. So he was a good friend, and he'd been very generous. And so I said yes. And I ended up in Guatemala, and I'd never been there before. I didn't speak Spanish, with a friend of mine, John Perkins, who had been in the Peace Corps in the Amazon, spoke Spanish, had studied shamanism, was very involved with indigenous peoples of the Amazon. And he was on the board of that same organization that I was helping out in Guatemala. And when we were in Guatemala, John, who was very tuned into that part of the world and the shamanic power, realized there was a shaman very deeply involved in the Mayan projects that we were visiting. And so through his skill, the shaman agreed to work with 12 of our travelers in a ceremony that began at midnight on a mesa in the mountains of Totonicapan, Guatemala, in a rural area where there was no lights. And we started the shamanic ceremony at midnight. So it was a moonless, starry, unbelievably clear night. The stars were, the Milky Way was so bright you could practically read at it.
Wow.
And the shaman was waiting for us. His name was Roberto Pose. And he was a very strange looking man. He had his face painted. He was wearing just Guatemalan clothes. And he was waiting for us, and he had built a fire, not a bonfire, but a pretty substantial fire in the middle of a flat place. And when we arrived, and after he greeted us, he told us to lay down by the fire with our feet towards the fire like a wagon wheel. And John, my friend, was translating. He spoke a little Mayan and fluent in Spanish. The shaman did not speak Spanish or English, but we could communicate through John. And so we laid down obediently around the fire. It was kind of strange, the middle of the night, big starry sky.
It's all your feet against each other.
Yeah, and you're like, ooh, what's going to happen? And he told us to close our eyes and journey. And John and the shaman started drumming. I closed my eyes. I mean, I can go back there right now. And the shaman started chanting, as shamans do. And there was no medicine involved in this, just the drumming and the chanting. And he was whistling and chanting and singing, and the drumming and the crackling fire and the night air and the stars. And it was just like completely awesome. And it was just glorious. And I loved it. And I thought, this is the coolest thing. And I'm just in bliss, trying to journey. Didn't know what journey was, but just enjoying the sounds and the smells and the heat of the fire and the crackling noises and the amazing drumming and the shaman's voice was so hypnotic. And then I started to have a strange thing happen in my right arm, and it started to quiver like this, and I had to extend it. I could not hold it close to my body for one more second. And so I extended it, and then my left arm started to quiver, and I couldn't hold that close to me for another second. And then I felt this weird thing growing on my face, hard thing. And then I just had to fly. There was no lying there for one more second. I had to fly. And I felt my whole body transform into some sort of flying apparatus. And I really started experience becoming this gigantic bird. And I looked down at the fire and the campfire, and I saw myself down there, lying there with everybody else. And the shaman's voice and the drumming and the whistling was still very evident. It wasn't far away, but I was flying up above all of that. And then I wanted to fly so badly into the sky. The stars were so gorgeous. And so I started flying up into the night sky. And I don't know how long that was, but it was blissful. And then I started to look down because it started to dawn. And I realized I was flying in this slow motion experience over a vast, 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 unending forest of green. It went as far as the eye could see, and it was so beautiful. And as the trees started to light up, and these mists started coming up from the trees, it was It was moving. I was, just mesmerized, hypnotized by the beauty of it all, and flying in slow motion like this. And then these disembodied faces of men with orange geometric face paint on their faces and yellow, red, and black feather crowns on their heads like this began to float up from the forest floor through the trees, through the canopy, and call to me, the bird, in a strange tongue that I didn't understand, but there was something beautiful about the way they were speaking this language. And then they disappeared back into the forest. And then once again, a little while later, they would float up again, just the faces with the orange paint and the yellow, red, and black feather crowns. And they would call again to the bird. And then they would go down in the forest. And I would keep flying, and then they would appear again. And then they would disappear, and then they would appear again, and they would disappear. And the encounter was one of a sort of extreme, it was moving for me. It was touching. It was plaintive. It was powerful. It was magical, obviously mystical. And then there was this loud drumbeat, and I remember being so startled by that loud noise. And I remember sitting up, opening my eyes and realizing I don't have any wings. There's no beak on my face. What was that? Oh my God, that was powerful. And I looked across where the fire had been. It was embers, so it was a pretty long time. I looked across the embers, and the shaman's face you couldn't really see him very well. But he, through John, told us to each share our vision, and we went around the circle, and everybody had become an animal, every person.
Wow.
Except for one woman who fell asleep and dreamt of her grandchildren. So there was someone was a snake, someone was a hummingbird, another person a wolf. I can't remember now, but when it came to my turn, I shared my story, and then it went around, and then John Perkins shared a very similar, almost exactly concomitant vision.
Wow.
So the shaman then completed the ritual, dismissed all the other people, and sent them to the minibus. And he sat down with Bill, sorry, not Bill, Bill wasn't with me, John and I. And he said, this is not a normal vision. You're being called. You're being communicated to. You need to go to these people who are calling to you. So I was like, what? I was on a 2-week leave from ending world hunger. This was not in my wheelhouse. So I said to John, I think they were trying to, whoever they are, that's for you. That's where you're going. And I am going to Africa. I have a meeting in Ghana in 3 days. I'm, whatever this is. I don't know where they are. He said, Lynn, I know who they are. I know where they are. They're the Achuar people. They're seeking contact. He said, I was just with the Shuar, and a hunting party came into our camp. I was just in the Amazon, in Ecuador, the Ecuadorian Amazon, with the Shuar, and a hunting party of Achuar came into the camp and said they'd seen in their dreams and visions that contact was inevitable. And so they were going to start asking for it, kind of seeking, calling for people who would come to them from the modern world. This is first contact, Lynn. This is awesome. You can't not go. This is absolutely critical.
Wow.
And I said, I can't, it may be a great privilege. It sounds wonderful, John, but I can't do that. I took 2 weeks out. It said, so I went to Ghana. He went back to the Amazon. But it was really disturbing, actually. So I'm in Ghana. So this is the next part of the story. In Accra, Ghana, which is the capital, in the Novotel, which is in the city, in the conference room on the first floor, which is a small conference room with an oval table. And there were 5 Ghanaian men and 3 Ghanaian women sitting around the table, the board of directors of the Hunger Project Ghana, and I was sitting in from the global office. And they're having their conversation. I wasn't leading the meeting. And at a certain point in the meeting, the men, and only the men, started having orange geometric face paint appear on their black faces. Now, the people in Ghana have almost blue-black skin, really dark, beautiful, beautiful people. And it was so stark, I thought, my God, how come no one's saying anything about this? In my head, I knew that no one else was seeing this.
Right.
So I thought I was going crazy. So I excused myself, went to the ladies' room, splashed my face with water, came back, and everybody's normal. And then it happened again. And I burst into tears. And this is 1994. So no cell phones, no internet. I just explained to them, I'm having some sort of a illness. I can't stay. I'm supposed to be here for 6 days. But I think it's too many time zones, too many countries. I really need to go home. I'm going to have to leave. Don't, worry about me. I'll go upstairs, pack my bag. I'll go to the airport. Just stay in your meeting. And I had to really convince them all because they were all worried about me because I was shaking.
Wow.
So then I did that. I got on a plane, went from Accra to Frankfurt to New York to San Francisco. And the whole time, whether my eyes were shut or open, the faces came. So when I got home, I was really a wreck, and I didn't really explain it to Bill the way I would explain it. I am explaining it to you because in retrospect, I now understand it, but I thought I was going crazy. So I was embarrassed and humiliated and frightened and desperate to talk to John Perkins. And eventually he came back to millions of faxes and voicemails, which is what we could do then. And he said, they're waiting for us. We have to go. They want 12 people from the modern world, people with open hearts, people who have global voice, can be heard around the world, people who know the rainforest is critical to the future of life, people who know indigenous wisdom is key to the survivability of the human journey, and people who will listen to the ways of the shaman. So John and I, pretty quickly put together that group of 12, and Bill was my first choice. And we traveled, as you did, to Quito, down the Valley of the Volcanoes, over the eastern side of the Andes, down the Pastaza River Canyon to the edge of the forest. And we had a military plane at that time, 1995, became 1995, took us into Shuar territory, and then a Shuar pilot took us 3x3 into Achuar territory, and we landed in a dirt landing strip near a river. And then they came out in the forest with their orange geometric face paint, their yellow, red, and black feather crowns, and, spears. And, it was pretty intense, the first visit. And loaded us in their canoes and took us up the Kapawari River to what is now the Kapawi Lodge, but it was the site where it was being built. And Daniel Cooperman was our guide, and he had made a arrangement with the Achuar to build a lodge for modern world people to come to them. So that encounter with those 12 people, Bill was one of them, changed our lives dramatically. So we participated with them for several days in the forest. Those indigenous leaders who were putting together their political federation for the first time. They didn't have any political federation.
Right.
And they needed modern world partners. They needed an office outside of the forest. They needed to understand the modern world and money. I mean, it was just staggering how much they knew without really having much of a relationship with the modern world. And they said, as the famous indigenous quote from Australia, but it's the same message: if you're coming to help us, don't waste your time, even though we invited you here. But if you're coming because your liberation is bound up with ours, then let's work together. And that is the foundation of the Pachamama Alliance. And so they both told us they needed to understand the modern world to protect themselves from it, because they saw danger was coming in the year 2000. They could see that it was coming. This was 1994, 95. But also they said the main work is to change the dream of the modern world.
Because the Ashwar are a dream culture, right?
Absolutely.
And I mean, that was what my experience, of which I'm still integrating 2 weeks out of the jungle. So I hesitate to even speak about it because it's still settling into my body. But one thing that certainly stood out was getting up at 3:30 in the morning and sitting in circle and drinking the Wayusa, the tea. And hopefully it's fun to share that, the practice of drinking the Wayusa so fast and in such volume that then you naturally purge. And then you sit and discuss your dreams from the night before. And I've never had like a psychoanalytical dream interpretation. Not to mention I was having vivid, highly detailed, very strange dreams while I was there.
Oh, you were good.
So I had a lot of material to be
fantastic.
examined. And I mean, I can like still viscerally feel the moments and remember what was spoken and what was shared. And it was just like, okay, there's a lineage of practice and wisdom here that is unlike anything I've encountered in my other contexts. And so, to witness a culture that brings dreams so much to the forefront and how the dreams are guiding so much of the daily action and the decisions being made. And I guess I had heard about it before this trip and I had one felt experience of it. And now having gone through it and just seeing like, no, this is real. This is how this culture is so deeply informed. And so, like that launches into this work of change the dream of the modern world. And maybe as a bit of additional context as well, like so much of my exposure to Pachamama Alliance was through the individuals who went through the Awakening the Dreamer Symposium, which you organized and continue to conduct for many years, and witnessing people's lives be transformed. We had an conversation with Andrew Hewitt, and one of the first things he said as he recounted his journey was life went from here to here, and then he went to an Awakening the Dream Symposium through Pachamama Alliance, and everything changed.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you could share a bit more about what is that symposium, and how did you go about receiving that message of change the dream of the modern world?
Well, I'll just say that the Pachamama Alliance, the word Pachamama means Mother Earth, or the earth, the sky, the universe, and all time. So, and it's an alliance between indigenous peoples of the Amazon, particularly the Sacred Headwaters region, which I'd love to distinguish at some point, and what I'll call conscious, committed people in the modern world for the sustainability of life itself. And when they told us that they wanted our support to understand the modern world and protect their land and territory, not only for themselves, but for the future of life, we really got it. We really got that. And that was where we started. And we realized from the lessons learned from all of this, we really can at some point begin to address the dream of the modern world, or what you and I might call the trance of the modern world. So it took us a while to take that on, because it was like, oh my God, that's like everything. That's like, oh my God.
First it was ending world hunger, now it's changing everything.
Like absolutely everything. So it took us a while to have the guts, or I don't know, it was kind of a long runway there. But we decided, well, we need to do that. We promised them. And we were learning so much from them too, actually, I got to say, because we started to realize, not learning from them, it's not really that way. I mean, you've just been there, so you know this. It's not like you learn from them. They don't like teach you.
Right.
You be in the space of how they see the world, and you start to realize, you start to see your old worldview, or the worldview you had before you went there. So you get out of the water you're swimming in enough that you can see how you used to see the world. And then you can see whether or not you want to reclaim that. So when we started going down there all the time, and so we started to see the world so differently, and we started to create this program called Awakening the Dream, or Changing the Dream, and we worked with Paul Hawken and Mary Levin Tucker and Brian Swim and Thomas Berry, and we got everybody all wise people we could think of to get involved in it, because we realized changing the dream was about not only environmental sustainability, and now we'd call that regeneration, but also about social justice, that you can't separate those.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody was putting those two together then. There was the
Mhm.
environmental people and the social justice people, and they weren't,
Right.
these people were pretty much white and these people were pretty much brown and black,
Mhm.
and they weren't working together on things. So we were early on in realizing, and Van Jones helped us a lot with that. He was
Mhm.
one of our greatest counselors, realizing this is all one thing. And then it was so clear to me, and I think to everybody, but to all of us, that this is also a spiritual breakdown. So you can't, it's all one thing. You can, of course, work on the spiritual track. You can work on the social justice track. You can work on the environment track. But we wanted to create an educational program, or a transformational program, really, that actually addressed the trance, the walking, sleepwalking to Armageddon thing that the whole culture that we live in has been doing, and in many ways is waking up from, but still kind of headed in a direction that's terrifying. So we called on every ally, every relationship. We researched the heck out of that thing, but mostly we worked on ourselves, because you can't change. You can't wake up from the trance. You can't wake people up from the trance unless you realize you're still in it yourself. So it's not like we woke up from the trance and then we said, waked everybody else up. That would be arrogant. That isn't the case.
Mhm.
The actual creating of the Awakening the Dreamer program is the Awakening the Dreamer program. It still is, as we refresh it, as we look at it. It is a constant shaking, penetrating through the apathy and the resignation that holds the trance of our culture. I mean, our big culture, our civilization, really, in place. And it also involves, as we put in the Awakening the Dreamer, literally hospicing the death of the old structures and systems that no longer serve us, and not killing them, actually, because they're unsustainable and they are dying. And if you hospice something, it dies with a sense of dignity. And you can actually acknowledge that in some ways there was a contribution there, while you midwife the birth of the new structures and systems that can serve us. Hospicing and midwifing are both acts of, in many ways, love, witness, and compassion. And that's the kind of the tenor of Pachamama Alliance. We have that sort of DNA. We're about transformation. And we're also about grounded optimism, you might say. So the Awakening Dreamer, Changing the Dream Symposium does not step over the huge, species extinction and the horrendous mass incarceration. And we address all of that in there, in that program. But in a way that you realize that what needs to be transformed is you. And out of that, engaging in the world newly and in a different way, the way Andrew now does, the way you do, the way everybody who listens to this kind of a program is doing. And we all have more work to do with ourselves. Of course, it's a never-ending story. So, and working with the narrative. What is the dream, the narrative, the story we're living in that's so false, the story of separation? And one of the beautiful things that we discovered in creating the Awakening Dreamer Symposium, I don't know if Bill, who was really the main creator of it, I would say in many ways, orchestrated the creator and a lot of the insights, if he would say this, but there was a point at which we realized human beings are not flawed. We're mistaken. And I know that sounds like such a simple thing, but we make ourselves so wrong, and we make ourselves so we're so ashamed and guilty, some of us, not everybody, or arrogantly powering ahead as if this whole thing is not happening. But there's something in there to realize if you don't have to fight to be right. We just need to realize we're mistaken, like deeply mistaken. But we're not flawed. Actually, we're part of this universe. We have a role to play.
Right.
And we're getting the feedback we need to course correct. The climate crisis is massive feedback. pandemic, massive feedback. So that's in the DNA of the Awakening the Dreamers. So people come out of it, they don't feel wrong. They feel inspired, activated, awakened, eager to participate. And they re-see, renew, respect. The word respect is re-spectate, re-look at the world we're living in now. So it's created hundreds of thousands of new projects and programs and initiatives and foundations, that program. And we don't track that because we don't want to take any credit, because we don't deserve the credit. But we've been useful, and the program's been powerful. And it leads to another program called Game Changer Intensive, which is I think it's our crown jewel, because it looks at the structures and systems that the trance has created that keep us stuck, and how to begin to dismantle them without attacking. There's a place for attack. I don't mean to say there isn't. It's just not our. It's not the role I play, or not the role we play. And that the Game Changer Intention is how to change the whole game,
right? And
that it is a game, really. And then now we're working on what we call climate action training, really getting people to get into action in their watershed, in their town, in their where they are, because people want to know. I got to do something. I got to do something. What to do and how to know how to do it and be effective. So Pachamama is about empowering us, about waking us up out of the trance, so that we can be the effective players on the playing field that really transform the game, change the game, and stay connected to the indigenous people of the forest who have really been the source, the inspiration for all of this in the Sacred Headwaters area of rainforest.
And you mentioned making that distinction with Sacred Headwaters. Can you share more on that?
Yes, because it's so amazing, this whole thing. I mean, it's just so amazing. I always, start to cry a little bit. I hope that's okay. But, where we were called was not just anywhere. We were called to the heart of the world. Some people might call it the middle of nowhere. No. It's the heart of everywhere, that place. It's right on the equator. It's the most biodiverse rainforest on Earth, most likely the most biodiverse place on this planet. And the indigenous people somehow, although they're not scientists in the traditional way you and I would talk, they know that. All ecosystems are vital. This ecosystem is the most biodiverse on Earth. Has more bird species within 5 miles of the lodge where you stayed than there are in North America and Mexico, like 10 times that. It's the source of the Amazon system, which is larger than the United States, the Amazon rainforest, just a huge, vital organ for this planet. Often called the lungs of the planet, yes, with the oceans, but it's really the hydrological heart of the planet. And there's real clear evidence that during the Pleistocene era, this area where we were called, which is about 88 million acres now, that we call the Sacred Headwaters, or the indigenous people call the Sacred Headwaters, is where millions of species migrated. The base of the Andes, the beginning of the whole Amazon rainforest, the source of the whole Amazon rainforest, where millions of species migrated during the Pleistocene era and made it through the Ice Age, and repopulated life. And it can do that again if other ecosystems fail. So the Andes are primarily volcanic mountains, and so the waters that come out of the Andes are highly dynamic and forge this massive rainforest system, river system, that has more water in it than the next 6 river systems combined. I'm sure you heard some of these things from Atosa, Sultani when you were there. So it's like incredible that that's where we were called. Most people think of the Amazon, they think of Brazil. And yes, most of the Amazon is in Brazil, but where it's, it's sourced in many places. But this place is where 30 indigenous nations are holding themselves accountable for the sourcing of the entire Amazon system. And fiercely defending it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also defending it in a way that's about a vision rather than stop, no, don't, stay out.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's important.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a vision coming from there, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I go, I feel it in my body.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like we were called to the source of life. That I don't know.
Mm.
No one can say really.
Sure.
But that's how it shows up for me.
You're taking me back there, and yeah, so much can be said about that place. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for the experience that I had was afforded in part by the work, the foundations that you and Bill and Atosa have laid. I'd never had the right context and opportunity where everything felt like a full yes and alignment to go into the Amazon until that experience and that trip. And so, knowing how much it shaped and moved me already, I can feel the value of what you're doing and have been doing for many years to thoughtfully and appropriately and delicately, have these cultural exchanges where people can meet and understand and greet one another deep in the Amazon. And yeah, it must be so gratifying for you to have done this work. And I would love to go deeper on that. And I also want to presence a lot of your work. You mentioned that you're a fundraiser and that you were doing fundraising for the Hunger Project. And you wrote a book called Soul of Money, which has also shaped so much conversation. And I think that was how I was originally actually introduced to you and your work. And so maybe we can, because this interview series has explored a lot of themes around finance and what does climate finance look like and what are the edges and the frontiers of this space, if you could share a bit more about that part of your many contributions.
Well, I've been fundraising all my life, actually. And I consider fundraising kind of almost like I sometimes say holy work, a little bit of a ministry, because in many ways I see fundraising is a great fundraiser is always if they're kind of really looking at what they're doing there. We're empowering people and institutions and everybody to reallocate the financial resources of our world away from fear and towards love. It's about reallocating resources in one's life, in one's investments, in one's world. And so much of the money in the world is in service of fear. What we're afraid of, weaponry and bombs and the budgets of pretty much every country in the world except for Costa Rica. Thank God for Costa Rica. The largest part of the budget is the military budget, the weapons, and then the arms trade, and it's just so horrendous. Not just that, but also overconsumption, and the way we use money is really out of fear, and so much of the time, fear of all kinds of things. But I'll say a little bit more about that, and moving it towards what we love, the health and well-being of our communities, the health and well-being of our neighborhoods, our environment, our children, and the health and well-being, as Bill McKibben says, of all children of all species for all time. That's where money should go. And so I'm constantly, since I've been a little girl, been reallocating resources in that direction, away from fear towards love. I would say if I look back. So I became the chief fundraiser of the Hunger Project. I didn't know how to fundraise, but we just knew that there was the front and the back side of the hand of hunger. And no one else saw it this way, but we did at the Hunger Project. The front side of the hand of hunger, malnutrition, starvation, the malabsorption hunger, the horrible physical tragedy of hunger, thousands and millions of people, mostly children under 5, dying way before their time because on a world awash with food, just it's an indictment of the human family, hunger. And then on the backside of the hand of hunger, the hunger for meaning, the hunger to make a difference with our lives, the hunger to matter. it's the hunger of the affluent world. And we always from the beginning saw these two hungers as one. And that these people are not somebody to feel sorry for. These here, the front side of the hand of hunger is, I learned so many of my lessons from people I used to call poor.
Mm-hmm.
I would never call them poor now that I know them.
Mm-hmm.
You work in Ethiopia after the famine. These people are not poor. They're strong. They're resilient. They're committed. They may not know how to read and write, but no one ever taught them. They never went to school. I always say it takes some more courage to live through one day than you and I are going to need in our lifetime. Some of these women who can't feed their children. I mean, just awesome people with the kind of inner strength and inner capacity to endure that, we take 100 workshops to get close to. They're whole and complete people living in poor circumstances. What's poor is their circumstances, not them. And when we refer to people as poor, we demean them and we demean ourselves, those of us who would see them that way. They're whole and complete people like us in absolutely oppressive circumstances and surviving and loving each other and finding moments to dance and sing in those circumstances. Mm-hmm. So I learned a lot of lessons from people that I used to call poor and a lot of lessons from people that I used to call rich. And I don't call people rich any longer because it has the same, inaccuracy. They're whole and complete people living in the ebb and flow and often tyranny of excess resources that have people not relate to them like human beings, relate to them like a checkbook or an ATM. It's just we label people in ways that we don't see our humanity anymore. Mm-hmm. So I learned so much from fundraising all over the world. I raised hundreds of millions of dollars. I trained 50,000 fundraisers in 57 countries. I raised money in Japan and Sweden and Korea and United States and Canada and Australia. And I even taught people to fundraise in Mozambique after the war from each other so that they would know it's not the World Bank that's going to save you. You're going to save each other, So fundraising has been almost like a path for me, like a spiritual path. And I learned so much about people and money and the anxiety, the upsets, the wounds and hurts everybody has in their relationship with money, even the wealthiest families, because I have the great privilege of working with some of our billionaire families now. And there's all kinds of darkness in those families. Not all of them, but money sometimes, especially excess resources, exacerbates and exaggerates the dysfunction rather than fixes it. So I learned a lot about money. Okay, so raising hundreds of millions of dollars for the Hunger Project and training fundraisers to fundraise from the heart, not manipulate, not be inauthentic, tell the truth. Our fundraising at the Hunger Project became legendary for its integrity. Yeah. And so everybody would say to me, this is so amazing the way you guys talk about money. You should write a book. And it was another one of these things. I can't write a book. I'm Andy Longer. But eventually, through another collaborative writer, Teresa Barker, who helped me pulled it out of me, I wrote the book, The Soul of Money. And The Soul of Money really is the teachings I received from Buckminster Fuller, and which became the heart of the Hunger Project, creating the context of responsibility and sufficiency in this world. Bucky taught me that we have moved from a you or me paradigm, a world of scarce resources where there's not enough for everyone and someone's going to be left out, to a world of enough resources where everyone everywhere can have a healthy and productive life. That's a you and me world, not you make it at my expense and I make it at your expense, or I make it at your expense. But you and I can both make it at nobody's expense. That's a completely different paradigm. Mm-hmm. And Bucky said in 1976 in a speech that I witnessed that changed my life, that's in the Soul of Money book, he said it'll take 50 years for humanity to realize we have enough. and that we don't need to compete with each other for scarce resources any longer, and that the mindset of scarcity is a false mindset.
Mm-hmm.
That the mindset, I don't have enough, there's not enough, we don't have enough, there's not enough, it's not enough, we don't have enough, there's not enough, which is what we wake up in every morning,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the culture we swim in. The economic culture is kind of dribbled over everything. That it would take, he said, 50 years in 1976 for our institutions, who are all rooted in scarcity, the economic systems clearly rooted in an unconscious, unexamined belief in scarce resources, that there's not enough to go around and someone's going to be left out. And so it's your job to get as much as you can for you and yours, whoever you consider that to be. That creates immediately an us and a them. And you'll help these people who are left out when you can, but not until you have way more than you need. And then maybe you'll help them if you can. But way more than you need gets more and more and more, etc. So that paradigm of thinking
Mm-hmm.
is an unconscious, unexamined lie in the culture in which we live, I think. And Bucky said in right around now, all the big institutions rooted in that mindset, there's not enough, will start to fall apart. The you or me mindset. Clearly the economy will start to fall apart. It will start being not work right, and we won't be able to fix it. Education will be kind of off course, and we won't be able to fix it. He said governance will be clearly off course, and we won't be able to fix it. Politics will be off course. He even said religion is based in a you or a me paradigm, unconsciously. And until we can really realize there's enough for all of us to have a healthy and productive life, Gandhi said in a short form, there's enough for our need, but not for our greed. That's kind of a simple way of saying this. And then we would recreate, Bucky said, though, from a completely new paradigm, all the institutions of humankind from a new way of seeing and being. So the Soul of Money book, to go back to that message, really unpacks the mindset of scarcity so that you can step out of it long enough to see that you've been living in it, that we all think we need, that there's not enough to go around. That's the first, what I call toxic myth. The second is more is better. More of anything and everything is better, no matter what. We want more of it in an indiscriminate, frantic, kind of insane way.
Mm-hmm.
People want more of anything and everything. And it's the source of massive waste problems, our environmental problems, our overconsumptive problems, our obesity problems, our drug problems. You could say that's another way of looking at what's off. And you just think about industries like storage. What is storage, for God's sake? It's a huge industry. And it's for the stuff we can't fit in the houses we already have. And then there's all these homeless people who don't have any place to live, but we're not building houses for them. We're building houses for the stuff we can't fit in the houses we
But we
live
may
in.
need it someday.
It's just like insane. So the first toxic myth is there's not enough. The second toxic myth is more is better. And the third toxic myth is that's just the way that it is, which is the source of resignation and giving up and succumbing and all that. So in the Soul Money book, I unpack that, and in our programs, we do a lot of work to unpack that thinking. And then if you clear that away just for the moment, you see what I call the profound experience of sufficiency. The profound recognition of enoughness, which is actually not an amount of anything. It's a way of being in the world. I mean, I'm sure it's the way of being of your community in New Zealand, that we are enough, we have enough, and we're going to do the beautiful things with it. There's a principle that I say and I write about in the book. If we let go of trying to get more of what we don't really need, which is what we're brainwashed to want more of, it frees up oceans of energy all tied up in that chase to turn and pay attention to what we already have. When we pay attention to what we already have, when we nourish what we already have, when we love what we already have, and when we share what we already have, it expands.
Right.
It's the opposite of what we think. So another short version of that is what we appreciate appreciates.
Mm-hmm.
What we appreciate appreciates. And then money flows like water or like blood. It doesn't clot. Blood needs to flow to keep us healthy. If it clots, it kills. Water needs to flow to nourish, purify, make things grow. When it's held and hoarded, it becomes stagnant, and people are holding it get sick, and they think they've got to have more. I mean, I'm thinking of ExxonMobil, who has had the biggest year in history, and they're trying to figure out how to invest it to get more.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, enough already, obviously. So there's this. It's a mindset, and we can step out of it. We can transform it.
Mm.
So the Soul of Money book is really about that. It's about money, but it's, money doesn't have a soul, but we do. And if we can drop into our soul, the way we use money will transform. And I know you're working on that. And I know a lot of people in your world are working in new economic models and new relationships with money, new forms of money, so that we're living in reciprocity like Indigenous people rather than accumulation. I want to be known for what I allocated, not what I accumulated in my life. So that's the Soul of Money work, and it's a privilege to do it, really, especially now because the jig is up.
Yeah.
Our economic system is crashing.
Yeah.
Rightfully so. Our inequality problem is obscene. No one, even the people who have the teeny percent at the top, are miserable about it, don't know what to do with the massive resources they have. So I think we're on the cusp of a huge breakthrough with that, and I'm so grateful you're working on it.
Yeah, well, we're following in your footsteps, and each generation has its work to do. So connecting those kinds of topics around, you said a lot of Pachamama Alliance is now orienting emphasis on climate action, and we're talking about kind of the reinvention of finance and money and the work being done there. For people in those realms right now who are on the playing field and listening to this or watching this, do you have any other guidance or encouragements for that, and people who are in the nitty-gritty of trying to think about reallocation of philanthropy resources or the invention of new forms of programmable money or bioregional fund development or rights of nature meets funding models, and you've shared so much richness, but I'm curious, is there anything else that you would leave us with, and then maybe any other final messages after that?
Well, I do. I mean, I just think everybody should reallocate their resources to the thing that's most deep in their core heart, their investments, their philanthropy, how they actually spend and how they earn. Every single way you deal with money, to really look at how you're doing it. And is it regenerating life, or is it destroying it? And of course, I want everyone to invest in the Sacred Headwaters Initiative, because for me, preserving the sacred headwaters of the Amazon is like, oh my God, we have to do that. We have to do that. And in order for Ecuador and Peru, who are completely, the two countries that are involved, completely, hooked and dependent on oil and mining, they can't extract themselves from it unless they see a way through financially. And we're starting to, I'm sure you talked about this on your trip, but we're starting to really see, and Indigenous people are a little bit open for the first time in our relationship with them, and we are too, in a way we never were, to what this evolution of the carbon markets. So, they were all about, you cannot commodify nature. We will never allow it here. And that made sense to us, made sense to me. But now I see that the marketplace, you can't avoid it. You can't pretend it's not there. You can't, we don't have time to wait until it transforms, really. We need to preserve particularly that place, I think, everywhere. And in order to get it from where it is now to into a place where we have what some of us would like to call forest protection units that could be provided on the marketplace to companies that are really looking to really taking everything they can down to net zero and really want forest natural solutions involved in their legacy, to get involved in these carbon markets, but get involved in the carbon markets in a way that's not a justification for bad behavior, but actually really with teeth and commitment and partnership and solidarity with Indigenous people. And I'm sure Bill talked to you about this whole way we're looking at that now. That could be the way through financially for the Sacred Headwaters of the Amazon. And so anybody who's thinking about a significant investment, that's a place to really consider philanthropically and then ultimately in the investment category. But I think philanthropically, we need to have $3 to $5 million pretty fast to be able to keep this window open while the carbon markets are being developed. And I, there's so much money out there. It's like, all going in every which way, but going in so many of the wrong directions.
Yeah.
And this is like nothing,
Right.
$5 million,
Right.
or whatever it is. Bill would probably say more. I don't know.
I mean, that was definitely one of my takeaways, is that the relative size of capital required to continue to keep right now trees in the ground, roads from being terraformed inside these most biodiverse, biotic pump, old growth rainforest ecosystems, is a rounding error relative to the endowment that the entire planet of humanity and all species currently enjoy from this ecosystem. Like it's really astonishing. And we are going to speak with Atossa Sultani, who helps lead the Sacred Headwaters Initiative. So be sure to visit that episode, and we'll put a link in the show notes. Yeah, so how do people get involved in the work of Pachamama Alliance, of Sacred Headwaters, of the books? Like, how do they plug in? Where did they go and find out more?
Well, Pachamama.org, Pachamama, one word, .org. All of our programs are on there. Journeys to the Amazon, like the one you took, are on that website. You just click on Journeys or click on videos, and you'll see lots of videos of Indigenous people speaking with translation. Also, beautiful films, and the Awakening the Dreamer, Changing the Dream program is now a 2-hour, online experience. Most people, did a day-long thing, but now it's really, really, really works for 2 hours of your time. And then the Game Changer Intensive is an 8-week program you take online with you in little groups of 12, and you talk about it online. That's a fantastic program. And then the Climate Action Training is just kind of getting up and running. And then going to the rainforest is a life-changing experience, and we have about 10 journeys a year. So I recommend all of that. And then soulofmoney.org, SOULOFMONEY, just like it sounds, .org is the website for the Soul of Money programs. Many of them are right now focused on women, not all, but I think this is the Sophia century. And I think this is the 100-year cycle when it's the first century of the third millennium. We have all these problems, and we're talking about 2020s being the pivotal decade, and it is. Another way of looking at where we are in time is that this is the first century in the third millennium. And we're only 23, not even 23 years in. And everything's up. And I like to think of this as the Sophia century, where women will take our rightful role in co-equal partnership with men, and the world will come into balance, and economics might become feminonomics. Kate Rayworth and some of these female economists are coming up with some really great stuff. So soulofmoney.org has a lot of programs for women to kind of free women from wherever they're stuck. But not only women. And then Living a Committed Life is on the Soul of Money website, but there's also a think, a web page for living a committed life. So you can type that in, or just you can type in my name too. All kinds of stuff comes up. But I really feel like there's getting back to living a committed life. It's really an all hands on deck time. And even the healthcare breakdown. I just want to say this one thing about the pandemic. Can I?
Yeah, please.
I see and this really comes from our Indigenous partners and the prophecies that we've been very gratefully privy to, and often I'm asked to carry some of these prophecies. I think the pandemic, in one way of looking at it, is morning sickness. And when you're pregnant and you don't know you're pregnant, you really do think you're sick. You know, you're throwing up in the morning, you don't feel right, things are sore that shouldn't be sore, you need naps, etc. And you go to the doctor and you find out, oh my God, I'm going to have a baby. And suddenly it's all fine that you're sick. It's super cool that you're sick. You share about, how I threw up this morning, because you have a context for it. And I suggest that one context for the pandemic is morning sickness for a species that's pregnant, that is ready to be reborn, that is going to maybe a long pregnancy. Pregnancy is not easy. And that we need to be reborn, really. We need an evolutionary leap. It is the Anthropocene era. We have a role in evolution now. It's not just we're the object of it. We're so powerful. We have a hand in it now. Maybe fortunately, maybe not. But and the pregnancy might be long and difficult, and not every pregnancy produces a child. So there's no guarantees. And then labor it hurts. And this is a collaboration between men and women, and trans people and everybody, But I remember when I was having my kids, one of the beautiful things about giving birth is the more it hurts, the closer you are to having a child. And the vision of having a baby pulls you through the pain. So there's a wonderful phrase from Michael Beckwith. I need to acknowledge this beautiful phrase. He says, pain pushes until vision pulls. And I think that's what's happening now. Pain is pushing us until vision pulls us. And this kind of a podcast and the kind of work you're doing, and hopefully the kind of work I'm doing, and the vision of Indigenous people and the vision of the Awakening the Dreamer, these visions of where we're going and what we're going toward is really important to pull us through the pain. The pain will keep pushing us, but we'll endure it. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be really, and it already is, fires and floods and earthquakes and tsunamis. But this has been predicted for centuries. This has been predicted by Indigenous people. This is called the transformation of the Pachacuti of dominance and darkness, which began in 1492, to the Pachacuti of balance and light, which is these 500-year cycles that Indigenous people have predicted in the Andes. And the change from the Pachacuti of dominance and darkness, which began around 1492, if that date rings a bell, was predicted to be over right around the year 2000 or 1992. That's when Pachamama started too. So they sort of sometimes see that as part of the prophecy. And then we go into the Pachacuti of balance and light, but the transition period, they say, the prophecy says, be 25 or 50 years of Pachamama, Mother Earth, humbling all her creatures so they will find their rightful role in relationship with her for the Pachacuti, the 500 years of balance and light. And I say that because we need that kind of vision. We need to know that we are struggling heroically with what wants to be dealt with, that we're, the undercurrent of the human family is headed in the direction of life, not destruction of life. Our habits, our mistakes, our mindsets that have made us so arrogant that we think we have the right to dominate each other and every other species on this planet. We all know that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in their heart of hearts, even the most vicious people.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel that if you take the long view, we're on track. It's happening. If you take the short view, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Get on the playing field. Be part of it. Don't hesitate. You have a role to play. Find it and play your heart out. And if it isn't the right role, play your heart out anyway, and then switch as soon as you can to the one that is yours. Just play. And health really is a function of participation. I've been recently connected with Daybreaker. Do you know that group?
Mm-hmm.
I love them.
Mm-hmm.
And Radha Agrawal and Eli have become my great friends. And they're giving $1 for every Daybreaker in April for the Pachamama Alliance. And so I've been going to the Daybreakers and speaking. And, dancing, celebrating, hugging, just being in love with life is also what we need now.
Mm-hmm.
We need to do a lot of that because
Mm-hmm.
it's serious business with everything at stake. But in order to love like life enough to do what we need to do, we need to celebrate life. And I'm grateful for your work. All the younger people in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my generation, we're not retiring, we're refiring, and we're on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see that there's more generations participating together now than ever in human history, the people like the Bill McKibbins and the third act people that are my generation, we're not playing golf. We're not at the country club. We're not in the condo in Florida. We're out there. And to be out there with the wisdom we have and the energy and smarts and technological advancements that you have been part of in your generation, and the people who are born today who will live to probably 105, it's just awesome what's happening. And there's a role for everybody. And I'm so glad I'm alive to see it.
Lynne Twist, what a wonderful privilege and pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for being with us.
My honor, my pleasure, my delight.
Wow. What can I say? Lynne is really incredible and one of a kind. To learn more, go to pachamama.org, where you can find out about their trips to the Amazon or consider making a donation to the work. Links are in the show notes. You can also see our conversations with Andrew Hewitt of Pachamama Alliance, as well as Atosa Saltani of Amazon's Sacred Headwaters initiative. Those are available and more at maearth.com. Please like, share, subscribe, give us feedback. We'll see you next time.